A little over 4 years ago, I made a bit of an odd purchase. I put the money down and bought a camera that was nearly a decade old. The Fujifilm X-Pro1 was already considered aging by then, and 4 years later, it's not getting any newer. But I'd heard many good things about it and wanted to try it out. For a while, the X-Pro1 served as a multi-purpose camera in my kit. I used it to test out various lenses, combinations, and setups. I used it as a black and white shooter, sticking to monochrome only and studying patterns of light. I used it as a have-fun camera when I wanted to mix things up and forget about the technical side of photography. And it's a bit sad to say, but lately, I haven't been using it much at all. On my shelves, I've accumulated more camera gear than I honestly need. And when I'm out in the world, I'd usually default to what's simple anyways. Typically an X100 series or the X-T4. Furthermore, with the addition of the X-Pro3, the X-Pro1 doesn't have as strong of a place with me anymore. The screen on this camera was always lacking a bit, there's less film simulations available, and the autofocus is slow. It's for those reasons I began to question whether or not I should keep this camera or sell it to someone who needs it more than I do. But of course, there's a reason why I and so many others bought this camera in the first place. The X-Pro1 has a long-standing reputation because of its sensor, the hybrid viewfinder, and unique design. But at the end of the day, how much of good aesthetic is personal preference and how much of it is actual objective metrics? Do I, like many others, just feel nostalgia for something we think is better? Is there still magic there, or is it just an older camera? Today, we'll try and answer these questions as we revisit the Fujifilm X-Pro1. Old sensor, old lens. Many would consider the X-Pro1 sensor to be the real gem of the camera. It's got characteristics that give its images an older, more nostalgic look. It's a bit difficult to explain qualitatively, but all it takes is a glance for many photographers to think, was this taken with an older camera? And yet despite that, the image quality of the X-Pro1 doesn't fall far behind. It's not like the cheaper, flimsy images you'd get from an older point-and-shoot. Some people like that, sure, but images from the X-Pro1 are still good enough to use professionally or as a tasteful choice. It's different enough without surrendering quality, giving it a place today where many modern cameras can look far too clinical. Because of this, I wanted to test a few lens combinations out to see how they'd perform with the X-Pro1 sensor. The first was this Super Takumar 50mm f1.4 I picked up in Japan. Some of you know, but I've been shooting with this lens on the X-Pro3 as the combination of viewfinder and slow manual focus pair well together. The images I observed from that combo seem to have a softness and halation to them, mainly because of the lens, and I quite like that. So I thought to myself, what would the images look like if I paired this lens with the old sensor of the X-Pro1 for an old sensor, old lens combo? Would it turn out to be a positive or negative mix, and what would the shooting experience be like? Well, let's test it out. Shooting experience. In terms of shooting experience, I have mixed feelings based on my observations. The X-Pro1 to begin with was a bit of a clunker. While the design and build of the camera appears to be made for street photography, it's a first generation and has problems of its own. The three primary ones I struggle with are the autofocus, the screen, and manual adjustments. Autofocus on this camera is slow and sometimes inaccurate, as you'd expect from something from 2012. This wasn't a problem for this specific combo since it's a vintage lens and we're manual focusing, but it'll matter later in the next comparison. Because autofocus isn't super amazing, I thought the manual focus route would suit the experience more. But to my surprise, manual focus was also quite tough. The screen of this camera is dated and it's hard to see clearly what you're shooting at. It's good enough for general framing, but might be better balanced with a good autofocus lens so you can just point and shoot. Similarly, the camera only has white focus peaking, which just looks like bright highlights, making it tough to see what's in and out of focus on an already bad screen. This resulted in a lot of missed shots for me. The final small difficulty for shooting on this camera is the lack of an ISO dial. You may have noticed when comparing the X-Pro1 to cameras like the X-Pro3 or X100V, but some later generation Fujis have a combined ISO shutter speed dial. This makes it easy to switch settings, shoot fully manual, and be more flexible with your shooting. The X-Pro1, however, only has the single shutter speed dial. It's not a big deal since you can custom set your ISO to the FN button, but I quickly found that changing my ISO manually that way takes way too long, so nowadays I just leave it on auto. All this is to say, the shooting experience of the X-Pro1, in my experience, is limited by the slow autofocus, the bad screen, and the lack of a combined ISO shutter speed dial. It's not the end of the world and later generations improved on these, but it's something to think about if you're downgrading to this camera, especially in 2025 or 2026. Nowadays, you might feel limited by those things. These qualities combined lead to what I think is a slower shooting experience, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Shooting with this camera, especially with a vintage lens, is like walking through the park, taking your time, and inhaling a breath of fresh air. It's not a quick turn, grab, and capture the moment camera, and that could be the experience you're looking for. Personally, I think this combination is suited for photographers whose primary subject matter is inanimate objects, slower calm environments, and slice of life. You can certainly use it for quicker street photography and other things as I've done in the past, but I feel less compelled to do so with this combo. When I hold this body lens setup, I honestly just want to walk through the park, take pictures of flowers and dogs or whatever, and take things slow. It's a nice feeling and a good reminder at times, but honestly, not my preferred style of shooting. I tend to be a bit more frantic and high-strung, and I need a camera that can keep up with that. Image quality. Image quality with vintage lenses can be a hit or miss. Not every vintage lens is of great optical quality, and some can actually be quite bad. The Super Takumar is pretty sharp as far as vintage lenses go, but if you look closely, you could probably still tell I shot with an older lens. These qualities of older lenses change the way your images look, and for some, give them the aesthetic they desire. Again, it's a bit difficult to describe, but I've seen it on other vintage lenses like the Konica Hexanon 40mm f1.8. I'd say it adds a bit of a haze to your images. Haze, not in a bad way, but a image characteristic way, where it looks as if your image is covered by a soft light cast or invisible fog. Light halation spreads out more, and images get a softer feel, kind of like ASIA, the film simulation. Maybe dreamy would be a better way to describe it. By technicality, this aspect could decrease your image quality, but if you're shooting with a vintage lens, that's probably not the point in the first place. All of these photos I took with this combo exhibit this dreaminess and lead me to edit into that feeling. I like the way the images look, although I will say I'm partial to the X-Trans 4 sensor. If this aesthetic is up your alley and you like a slower pace to photography, I'd recommend this combo, or at least adapting a vintage lens. Old sensor, new lens. One of the great benefits of the X-Pro1 is that you can use it with newer X-mount lenses. In the past, you'd hear people talk about investing in lenses, not bodies, since bodies go out of date fast and get replaced more often. And while true to an extent for other cameras, the X-Pro1 has been a bit of an exception. It's one of the few older cameras that's still remarkably popular and compatible with newer gear, allowing for more and more interesting combinations as time passes by. We just ran through the old sensor, old lens combo. Now let's take a look at the old sensor, new lens combo. Currently, the newest X-mount lens I have is the 33mm f1.4. This is a well-regarded remake or Mark II of the older 35mm f1.4 that came out with the X-Pro1 in 2012. That lens apparently also had a lot of special character to it, but we're not going to talk about it since I've never tried it. The newer 33mm, although not having those same characteristics of the older version, is sharp, clean, works well, and the best part, it's got great autofocus. We mentioned earlier the slow and clunky autofocus of the X-Pro1. This wasn't a problem for our manual focus setup, but will be apparent on most other lenses, especially at night. The camera itself has a hard time grabbing subjects and will sometimes focus in and out until it eventually gives up. Again, no judgment, it's almost 14 years old. But what if we took the fancy, new linear motor autofocus of the 33mm f1.4 and paired it with the X-Pro1's slower autofocus? In theory, they should balance each other out, right? Well, in recent photo sessions, I ran that setup. Here's what I learned. Shooting experience. Most of my photography is what you could call scene street photography. I like a combination of environment and subject. I don't always need faces and expressions to make it work, and I'll shoot the occasional landscape here and there. And I pretty much rarely ever take photos of cars. When I do, it's usually random ones on the street that I think look nice or fit in with the environment. But recently, I got a chance to go to a car meet and decided to bring along this old sensor, new lens combo. I figured it'd be a good way to test it, especially at night, and see if the pairing would balance each other out. Here, I focused mainly on car compositions and less street photography, since that was the main focus of the day. In terms of shooting experience, the 33mm is vastly different from the Super Takumar. The autofocus was fast and snappy, proving our theory right, and turning the X-Pro1 into almost a point and shoot. I'd say it was good about 80% of the time, but occasionally the camera would struggle to keep up. Low light wasn't perfect, but was much better than I've experienced with other lenses. Seeing stuff was still a little difficult with the screen, but if you just use it for general framing, you'll be fine. You also have the viewfinder, which is decent on this camera, so if you prefer that, then the screen doesn't matter as much. Shooting with this combination felt very similar to more up-to-date cameras, and could be a great option if you want something faster while keeping that X-Pro1 look. Image quality. It'd be wrong to compare the images with the 33mm to the ones of the Takumar simply because of subject matter. One I took for a more dedicated photo session, the other I just went for walks in the park. And in this case, it'd be tough for the Takumar to outshine the 33. That being said, I do prefer the images I took with the new lens combo more. This is because they're crisper and cleaner, while still having the X-Pro1 sensor. The shots with the Takumar, although some may prefer it, sway a lot further in the vintage direction. That's not a bad thing, of course, and it comes down to taste, but I've always preferred a slightly more modern look. Just looking at some of these edits, I think you'd be hard-pressed to tell what it was shot on. The images themselves are clean, although there's something about them that you can tell is not fully modern. It almost reminds me of the look you'd get when shooting with a low megapixel camera on a decent sized sensor. I actually enjoy this look a lot since modern cameras take it a bit too far. So maybe that's the magic everyone's talking about. Worth buying in 2026? All things considered, buying the X-Pro1 in 2025 or 2026 is a strange purchase. You'd have to be a certain type of photographer to want an older camera in the first place, and the X-Pro1 is niche even amongst that. Maybe you had the camera in the past and want to relive that experience. Or you find newer cameras boring and dull and need some kind of mix-up. Or maybe you're attracted to the idea of committing to an older, worse system that either meshes with you or you think is cool. Now, if you can live with or even want some of the weaknesses we mentioned earlier, then this camera might be right for you. Because many of these downsides can be worked around. You can lean into it, adapt a vintage lens, and run an old sensor, old lens combo. It won't be exactly like film, but the slow shooting experience is there, with the convenience of digital. Or you can try to balance it by adapting a new linear motor lens like the 33mm for an old sensor, new lens combo. This can help speed up the accuracy and shooting experience while still giving your images that X-Pro1 sensor touch. And although less practical, maybe you'll enjoy photography more this way. Because the X-Pro1, although loved by many, is showing its age. If you're in the market for it, you're probably interested in three things: the design or shape of the camera, the hybrid viewfinder, and the sensor. I myself have always liked the shutter sound of the X-Pro1. But even after all this trial and error, I still can't fully put a finger on what's special about the X-Pro1 sensor. Many people talk up a storm about the look, but some images just look older to me. And there are honestly moments where I take photos with this camera and think they just suck. But there are also times, like at the car meet, where the look really surprises me. I'm never fully sure if it's a good photo session or just the camera itself. And I can't quite delineate between whether or not the camera sensor is a better look or just nostalgia. But then again, I didn't own this camera when it first came out, so I wouldn't know. Personally, I've always been fond of the X-Trans4 sensor of the V, the X-T4, and the X-Pro3. And that's why I shoot with those cameras. But I don't actually know if it's the sensor or the fond memories for the time I fell down the rabbit hole of photography. Maybe I'll fully understand it later when I go back to the V as a 14-year-old camera and see if I find magic or just another box. Now, after everything we learned, I can say this camera is only worth it if you're fully committed. Because if I'm honest, at its price point, it's a bit of an investment. 4 years ago, when I first bought the X-Pro1, I paid about $450 for it. Nowadays, a good condition version will cost you somewhere around $600. That's nothing to scoff at, especially when there are other, not as old but still decent cameras on the market for a similar price. As it stands, I am on the verge of selling my X-Pro1, letting it go to someone who deserves it more than me. I can only hope I don't come to miss it. So if you're in the market for an X-Pro1, hopefully this video cleared some of those things up. If you're looking to learn more, check out Photography Essentials. It's free. If you're interested, we've got new merch, photography zines, and prints also available. And a new project of mine is coming out soon. Look forward to it. It's basically done. Happy shooting. Have a great day. Peace.